1001, 1002, 1003, 1004.
Hello guys, this is Max, and today I'd like to show you a little tool I've been working on recently. The idea actually came from a mission I'm currently building for DCS, where I'm trying to recreate a real historical mission flown by a female A-10 pilot during the Iraq War. While I was working on the mission, I spent quite a lot of time creating and refining the female voiceovers, as always, trying to make the whole experience feel as realistic and immersive as possible. And then, during the Air-to-Air Refueling, I suddenly found myself hearing the standard male DCS player voice. So I started looking to whether it was possible to replace the pilot's voice, specifically during the Air-to-Air Refueling procedure. But in the current version of DCS, after the latest updates, those AAR player recordings are no longer exposed as individual audio files that you can just locate and swap. The calls are handled through the DCS speech system, so replacing the voice required a different approach. The solution uses a custom audio override together with a very small targeted modification to the DCS NATO.lua speech file, which allows the original player AAR calls to be replaced with custom recordings. Once I had the female version working properly, I really liked the result.
Texaco 11-906, request rejoin.
Texaco 11, proceed to pre-contact at 15,000 at 210.
Ready pre-contact.
Cleared contact.
And at that point I thought, why stop there? Why not create a male version as well? And more importantly, why not make it possible for anyone to use their own voice recordings for these specific air-to-air refueling calls? So that eventually became the DCS Pilot AAR Voice Manager. The tool lets you switch between a built-in female voice pack, a built-in male voice pack, or a completely custom voice pack using your own audio files. And the whole point of the manager is that you don't have to manually edit Lua files, build speech folders, or calculate audio timing yourself. The tool handles all of that automatically, including validation, backups, and restoring DCS back to its original state. Okay, so since I wanted to use a female pilot voice for a particular mission, I obviously had to record female samples to replace the native male DCS pilot voice. The AAR procedure basically involves three main player messages: intent to refuel, ready pre-contact, and abort to rejoin. The last two are relatively simple because each one can be replaced by a single WAV file. Intent to refuel is more complicated instead because DCS does not normally play it as a one single recording. The native speech system builds the transmission dynamically from several separate audio components, putting them together to create a complete call such as Texaco 11, Enfield 1, or request to rejoin. If I had wanted to leave the native DCS speech system completely untouched, so without modifying a NATO.lua file, I could in principle have recorded my own female samples for all that standard tanker call signs, all the native DCS pilot call signs, and all the numbers used to build those call signs. But apart from requiring a large number of WAV files, I would also have to accept using one of the standard DCS call sign for my own aircraft. And for several reasons, this is something I almost never do in my missions. I usually try to use call signs that were actually used in the specific historical or operational context I'm trying to recreate. For the tanker call sign, however, I was willing to accept a compromise. In many missions, there is no real need to use a different tanker call sign every time, and Texaco is one of the most commonly used ones. So having Texaco 11 fixed inside the recording was acceptable to me. There was also another problem, and probably the most important one. When the native DCS speech system assembles a transmission from several separate audio samples, the result can sound rather robotic and unnatural. So, to solve both problems at once, I choose to modify the intent to refuel handler in NATO.lua. This prevents DCS from building the intent to refuel transmission using its own tanker callsign, player callsign, and request to rejoin components, and instead makes it play my complete wave file as one continuous transmission. So, for example, I can have a single recording, say Texaco 11, yard 06, request to rejoin. The compromises I have to accept are therefore: NATO.lua is modified, which means multiplayer servers enforcing integrity check or pure scripts may reject the modification. If my recording says Texaco 11, then the tanker in the mission editor has to be Texaco 11, otherwise the spoken transmission obviously will not match the actual tanker. My pilot call sign is not dynamic. If in another mission I want to be Razor 1 or Enfield 2, I need to create a different wave specifically for that mission. But in exchange, the entire transmission is played as one continuous audio file, giving a much more natural and realistic result. The second modification to NATO.lua is completely optional, and this one affects the tanker's reply. The tanker still replies using the native DCS voice, because this mod only replaces the pilot voice, okay? So this is not a tanker voice mod, it's only for the pilot voice. Normally the tanker reply includes my native DCS callsign as a part of the response. If this second modification is enabled, the tanker will not pronounce my player callsign. I added this because if I am using a non-standard call sign such as Ghost 1 inside my custom request to rejoin wave, I personally think it is better for the tanker to say nothing at all rather than call me by a completely different DCS call sign such as Ford or Enfield 1. For the included male and female preset packs, however, I decided to use a more standard and less hardcore solution. The pilot simply says Texaco 11, request to rejoin. There is no player call sign in the recording because with these preset packs I assume that you are using one of the standard DCS call sign assigned to your aircraft. This way, with the optional second modification disabled, the tanker can still use your actual DCS call sign in its reply, so the conversation remains consistent. It may not be perfect and the ultimate solution in terms of realism, but it keeps everything coherent while still allowing you to use the female pilot voice if you want it, or simply a more natural pilot voice with a male pack. If you use the custom voice pack, on the other hand, you can create your own files using whatever call signs and voices you prefer. In that case, you are completely free to create a request to rejoin transmission with your own call sign, an historical call sign, a fictional one, or whatever works for your mission. And if you are using a non-standard pilot call sign, you can also enable the second modification so that the tanker does not reply using a different native DCS call sign. Okay, so to install the manager, you simply download the file, the zip file, you open it, you extract it anywhere on your hard drive. I already did this. And you'll find this folder, you open it and you launch this batch file, launch _DCS pilot AAR voice manager.bat. Okay, so this is the application interface. At the top, under current status, you will normally see DCS Stock. This is where the manager shows the current state of the modification. So if it says DCS Stock, it means that no voice pack is currently active and DCS is in its original configuration. If one of the voice packs is active, you will see that pack indicated here instead. Let's start, for example, with the female voice pack. You simply select it here. Once you have selected the voice pack, you also have this optional setting: suppress player call sign in tanker reply. By default, this option is off. When it's off, the tanker response behaves exactly as it normally does in DCS, including the pronunciation of your standard DCS player call sign. If you switch it on, the manager removes your player call sign from the tanker response. I'll explain in a moment exactly why I had this option and when it may be useful. If you move the mouse over this setting, you will also get a short explanation of what it does. At this point, you can optional run a dry run. This is not mandatory. The dry run simply checks that the selected pack, the DCS files, the speech system and the selected callsign option are all in a valid and compatible state before anything is changed. It is especially useful when working with custom voice, because in that case you may be importing your own audio files. But for the standard female or male pack, it's completely optional. Once you are ready, just click Enable/Apply Selected Pack. The manager will apply both the selected voice pack and the callsign option you have chosen. After the operation is complete, you can close the application and launch DCS. Then, during the air-to-air refueling procedure, you will hear the female voice speaking in place of the standard DCS player voice. So, to summarize the technical side, the manager always modifies the first handler because that is required for the custom request rejoin audio to work. The second handler is modified only if you enable the suppress player callsign in tanker reply option. Those are the only changes the application makes to the NATO.lua file. And of course, if at any point you want to go back to the completely original DCS configuration, you can simply click the green button, Restore DCS Stock. The manager will ask you for confirmation, and once you confirm, it will restore the original DCS state. The application also creates automatic backups before making changes, so the whole process is designed to be reversible and safe. In other words, you are not manually replacing random DCS files or permanently altering your installation. The manager keeps track of the state, validates the file, creates backups, and can restore the original configuration whenever you want. Okay, so now let's take a look at the custom voice option, because this is probably the most interesting part of the application. The idea is very simple. Instead of using the built-in female or male voice pack, you can import your own recordings and use them during the air-to-air refueling procedure. The custom voice section requires 3 audio files. The first one is request to rejoin. This is the transmission played when you contact the tanker and select intent to refuel from the radio menu. The second one is ready pre-contact. This is your player response when you are ready to move into the pre-contact position. And the third one is abort refueling. This is the player transmission used when you abort the refueling procedure. To load your own recordings, simply click Browse next to each entry and select the WAV file you want to use. Your original file names do not matter. The manager automatically imports them and assigns the exact file names and folder structure required by the DCS speech system. So you don't have to manually rename anything or build any DCS folders yourself. Once a valid file has been loaded, its status will change to ready. You can use the play and stop buttons next to each file to preview the recording directly from the application. This is useful if you want to quickly check that you selected the correct file before applying the pack. All 3 recordings must be loaded and valid before the custom voice pack can be applied. There is one especially important detail regarding a request to rejoin. Because this recording replaced a transmission that is normally generated directly by the DCS speech system, the manager needs to know how long your custom audio actually lasts. It measures the duration of the request to rejoin wave automatically and then calculates the appropriate DCS speech timing. This prevents the tanker from replying too early and talking over your custom transmission. So again, you don't have to calculate or edit any timing values manually. The manager does that automatically every time you load a new request to rejoin recording. Once your 3 files are ready, select Custom Voice Pack, then choose whether you want to use the optional Suppress Player Callsign in Tanker Reply feature. The dry run verifies the files, checks the DCS speech system, calculates the timing, and confirms that the selected configuration can be applied safely, without changing anything yet. If everything is valid, you can then click Enable Apply Selected Pack. The manager will create the required custom voice structure, apply the selected audio files, update the request to rejoin timing, and make the required NATO.lua modification automatically. After that, you can close the application, launch DCS, and your own recordings will be used during the air-to-air refueling procedure. Another useful thing is that your imported custom voice recordings are stored by the manager in its own persistent folder. So if you restore DCS back to stock, your custom recordings are not deleted. You can later select custom voice again and reapply them without having to import everything from scratch. And if you want to see where those files are stored, you can simply click Open Custom Folder. So basically the custom voice system allows you to create your own AAR player voice without manually editing Lua files, renaming DCS speech files, building folders, or calculating audio timing yourself. You provide the 3 recordings and the manager takes care of everything else. Okay, so now I want to show you an example of custom voice setup. I've uploaded my custom voice audio wave files. This is the request to rejoin.
Texaco 1-1, Ghost 1-1, request rejoin.
As you can see, I'm using my own call sign in my own audio file. This is the ready pre-contact.
Ready pre-contact.
Okay, and this is the abort rejoin.
Abort rejoin.
So now I want to enable this option because since I'm using my own call sign, I don't want the tanker to reply to me using the standard DCS call sign that is set in the mission editor. So I'm going to choose on here. Okay, and now I'm going to enable apply selected pack. Okay, now I can close the application and run DCS. Okay, so now I'm going to do an overdub over this video files because I made a mess with my headphones. So I'm in active pause. I'm going to select the tanker and the intent to refuel.
Texaco 1-1, Ghost 1-1, request rejoin.
Texaco 1-1, proceed to pre-contact at 15,000 at 230.
Okay, as you can see now, I have enabled the option to remove my call sign from the tanker reply, and he replies only with his own call sign. So Texaco 1-1, it doesn't say Enfield 1-1, but it jumps directly to proceed to pre-contact. Okay, now this is the ready pre-contact.
Ready pre-contact.
Return pre-contact.
And this is the abort rejoin.
Abort rejoin.
Okay, so let's suppose we have just closed DCS and we wanna change our voice pack and try the female voice pack. So we select it here. The female and the male stock voice pack do not include the call sign in the request to rejoin wave file. They are more standard. So I think that this option, it's not essential now, so we can let the tanker call us with the call sign that is set in the mission editor for our flight. So we switch to off this option, then we do enable apply selected pack. Yes. Okay. Now I close the application and let you hear the changes in DCS. Active pause on. I'm gonna open the menu.
Texaco 1-1, request rejoin.
Enfield 1, Texaco 1-1, proceed to pre-contact at 15,000 at 230.
As you can hear, now the tanker calls my DCS stock call sign.
Ready pre-contact.
Return pre-contact.
Abort rejoin.
Okay, so now we have just closed the DCS. We open again the manager, and I quickly want to show you what happens when I decide to restore DCS to its stock configuration. So I click here. Yes. Okay. Now I'll close the app and launch DCS again. Okay, so now we are inside the cockpit. I'm going to make active pause on. Okay. I'm going to select the channel of the tanker and make the call.
Texaco 1-1, in field 1, request rejoin. Enfield 1, Texaco 1-1, proceed to pre-contact at 15,000, at 230. Ready, pre-contact. Return pre-contact. Abort rejoin.
Okay, thank you so much if you have stayed with me all the way to this point in the video. I know this was a long video, but there was quite a lot to explain. I really hope this tool will be as useful to some of you as it is to me. Of course, there are still some compromises and limitations, but I'm continuing to look for ways to improve it and hopefully expand it in the future. At the same time, I also have to work within the limits of DCS itself, because the current speech structures like ATC, JTAG and similar systems are still built in a very rigid way, and there are limits to what can be improved without rebuilding those systems from scratch. Anyway, thanks again for watching and let me know in the comments what you think. See you soon, bye!